Good morning. I'm Evan Elkin, the Executive Director of Reclaiming Futures. It's a great honor for me to be invited to offer these keynote remarks on the occasion of the inauguration of Reclaiming Futures Nigeria. A big thank you to Ejikeme for inviting me to speak to you all today. I met Ejikeme nearly 6 years ago on the occasion of his visit to our offices at Portland State University in the state of Oregon here in the United States. He came to visit Reclaiming Futures as part of a delegation from Nigeria of public health, child welfare, and justice system officials. We all spent a day together at the university, and my colleagues and I shared with the delegation the history and the core elements of our work here in the United States and our mission to transform our juvenile justice system and other youth-serving systems to make them more developmentally aligned and responsive to the needs of youth and families, as well as more fair and equitable for all youth, for all racial and ethnic and economic backgrounds. Here in the US, there are profound disparities in youth outcomes and in the punitive practices associated with our justice system based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, and sexual orientation. So our mission is both about public health and equity and fairness. What I didn't know at the time of that visit, and what I've come to learn about Ejikeme in the years since that visit, is that while he was working with us at the university for that day, a seed was planted. And that Ejikeme left that meeting in Portland inspired to bring our approach and our mission back to Nigeria to improve the lives of the most disadvantaged young people in your country. I have learned that seed has blossomed over the years into a very important set of programs under the Reclaiming Futures umbrella. Much more work remains, but congratulations to Ejikeme and all of the colleagues present today for your successes thus far. Reclaiming Futures has been in existence for 22 years. We've implemented our model all across the United States, and today marks the first time an adaptation of our approach has been implemented outside of the US. This is something we're very proud of, and we look forward to providing guidance to Ejikeme and other of your colleagues in this effort to lead the work forward in the coming years. We consider Reclaiming Futures a public health organization. And what does that mean? A healthy public health system is one that gives equal weight, not just to treatment for individuals who need it, who are or at the deep end in terms of their need, but one that prioritizes prevention and elevates programs and the natural elements in society that prevent youth from getting off track and for needing more serious intervention in the future. Prevention is very important in that framework. But perhaps the most important element of a public health system are those elements that often go unnoticed unless they are absent from a young person's life. Those are the natural elements in society that promote emotional wellness and positive youth development. In our field, these elements are often referred to as the social determinants of health. And they are things like a strong family, where adults care for the welfare of their children, access to nutrition and nutritious food. For youth, a key social determinant of health is whether they have access to caring adults within and outside the family. Research bears this out all the time, that mentors and positive adults are really critical to young people. And perhaps most importantly, for the youth we work with in our Reclaiming Futures programs across the country, the presence of a safe environment where you can make mistakes, where young people can make mistakes, where they're allowed to make mistakes and encouraged to make mistakes, to learn to control their impulses, to regulate their emotions, to learn the impact their behavior can have on others, and to do so without being judged or criminalized, or to have their future possibilities limited or taken away simply because they're being adolescents. We refer to this as positive youth development, and all youth, even those in trouble with the law, deserve and can benefit from positive youth development opportunities. This isn't just a philosophy that we hold, but this has been borne out in brain science. We now understand that the process of human development doesn't really stop as far as the brain is concerned until a young person is 26 years old. The knowledge of what brain science has told us has had a great influence on our juvenile justice practices here and has eliminated some of the more punitive elements and our views of culpability and guilt in a court setting, because we now know that the brain takes much more time to develop than we ever thought. So the term reclaiming futures, well, it's come to mean many things over the years, and you'll come to find your own definition of what that means, what reclaiming futures means, and how that affects how you think about the program you're building in Nigeria. But for me, it's really about the belief that no young person's future is worth giving up on. And there's really no such thing as a kid who is too far gone to support. So with that definition, you can understand why we focus so heavily in our work and what can be done upstream of the juvenile justice system, and not to wait till kids are in deep trouble. And to work and empower those systems in society, like schools, family, faith-based organizations, sports programs, vocational programs, and other youth leadership programs who have the power to open doors for youth and to remove barriers so that young people have hope, have skills, and the support they need to envision their own future and a better chance of getting there. I'm always surprised at how, in spite of thousands of years of human society, and the fact that we were all once children and adolescents ourselves, and some of us made some pretty bad mistakes, that with every new generation of adolescents, we seem to have amnesia for what it meant to be an adolescent ourselves and what it took for us to go from being full of confusion and mistakes and inexperience to then become productive adults. Most of us get there with very little support. And for the kids who need support, it doesn't take much. We all have a tendency to pathologize the developmental phase of adolescence itself. And there are jokes out there that say adolescence is a disorder in and of itself. And we always panic when we see kids going off track, and we try to contain and control them. But what we believe at Reclaiming Futures is that less can actually be more. And whenever possible, we should offer a lighter touch, second chances, safe places to make mistakes and try new things, to build new relationships and experience themselves in more positive and new ways. And this holds true even for the most troubled youth, perhaps especially for the most troubled youth. And this is not meant as a critique of your juvenile justice system, if it sounded that way, but a reminder for all of us stakeholders, including parents, and I'm a parent of an adolescent myself, to have more faith in our young people and their potential, and not to give up on them when they've made a mistake, and maybe even a bad mistake. In the US, it's a reality that when the juvenile justice system overfunctions as a, kind of in a role of a parent or caretaker of adolescents, and it's all too willing to take on that parenting role sometimes, especially when kids get off track. This allows all the other natural systems in society, including schools, families. I'll mention again the importance of faith-based communities and the natural helpers, as we call them in communities. When the juvenile justice system overfunctions, those other good systems start to atrophy and weaken, and to lose their influence over youth, to abdicate their authority, and to lose, most importantly, the joy and satisfaction of seeing youth get through a tough time to a better time and into adulthood. In many settings, when kids are in trouble, we stop playing that role, and we can still do it. So parents need hope as well as young people. So when Reclaiming Futures first began 22 years ago, it was really at a low point in the field of juvenile justice in the US. Teenagers were being locked up at unprecedented rates. We were building more prisons than ever before, and we were locking up young people often for very minor offenses. We started to see teenagers as dangerous mini criminals, small adult criminals, and a risk to society. And we had not yet found an attitude, which thankfully we've found now, of greater empathy, understanding of brain development, and a focus on the root causes of why kids misbehave. And in the old environment, when Reclaiming Futures first started, schools were very quick to send kids to juvenile courts, and so were parents. And I think it's worth taking a look at where you're at as a society and how quickly your instinct is to send kids away to other systems rather than to take a look inwardly. I like to say that back then, our system was like a hospital that only had an emergency room and an operating room and nothing in between. None of the things that we know in public health are important, like the early identification of difficulties through screening for things like suicidality, trauma, depression, drug use. There were no prevention programs in the community for kids who show those early signs and don't really need a deep end intervention. And really no faith in the positive youth development opportunities in the community and a belief that they can promote wellness for kids when they get off track. So, we like to take some credit for the 2 decades we've been working at a national level and at a local level is to bring our public health orientation and our approach to these systems so that we can help them to screen for difficulties early and have an attitude of looking for root cause and to recognize the importance of community-based prevention programs and even to help build those youth development programs as alternatives to detention or incarceration or other court programs, and to create programs that strengthen families and focus on the needs of families who may be likely to feel that they don't have the strength to handle their kids, to focus on strengthening families and other institutions themselves, really in order to take the pressure off the juvenile justice system, which really, during those early decades before Reclaiming Futures began, the system really felt overburdened and felt it had to be kind of that hospital for young people. Thankfully, it no longer feels that way entirely. We've had much success with this strategy here. Detention and incarceration of youth is way down, well below the levels of the 1990s when we first started. And nearly all juvenile courts, as a matter of practice, do comprehensive mental health and substance use screening and routinely make referrals to treatment programs and other diversion programs. And we've really helped inspire the courts to support schools and families to handle difficulties with youth on their own without sending them to the juvenile courts. That's really the goal. Some of our judges joke and say, what I really want to do is put myself out of a job. Juvenile systems are not simply saying no to court referrals, but they're building community partnerships. They're really looking to families in different ways and empowering them rather than looking at them as the problem. And in some instances within our network are even sharing their funding to build programs in the community. We recently had a partner here in the state of Oregon where I work to spend a couple of $100,000 of their own funding to build a school-based prevention program because their mission is to stop the flow of kids from schools into the court. So thank you for listening today. You have a big program ahead of you. I wish I could be there in person or live on Zoom. And I really appreciate the opportunity to address you this morning. I have so much confidence in Ejikeme, his leadership, and I really feel confident that you're going to see some of the same outcomes in Nigeria that we saw in the United States. So we at Reclaiming Futures wish you the best of luck.